It's my pleasure to bring back our chairman of the day, Ryan Spur of Connection. He'll be moderating our first panel, and the discussion is titled All Aboard, How to Get All Stakeholders to Understand and Implement Your Long-Term Digitalization Plan. Ryan, I'm going to leave it to you to introduce our distinguished panel of manufacturing experts.
Yeah, Maureen, thank you. And hello and welcome to all our attendees joining our session. Excited to be here and joined by my peers as we take on this larger topic of stakeholder alignment and strategies around successful digital transformation. But before we begin, please allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists. I'm joined by Sama Mbang, Global Head of Digitalization at Daimler. Welcome, Sama.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike Gerlach, Operations Technology Specialist at 3M. Welcome, Mike.
Hello.
And Matt Hang, Vice President of Product at Vertex Software. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Ryan.
So let's get into it. We all had a brief session before this panel to get to know one another, discuss our roles and experience. And I think as we reflected on the panel topic and goals, I think we acknowledge that people as individual contributors, leaders, there's companies as a whole focus perhaps too much attention on the innovative technology. And so don't get me wrong, the technology is changing faster than any point in our lifetimes, and in ways this new technology is better prepared to enable our business goals. So there's no doubt it's changing our trade. But there's almost this expectation that technology alone will speed us to the highest levels of maturity and will sort of solve all our problems. Yet, as we discussed, for true success in industry or manufacturing 4.0, we also need to bring focus to the leadership and soft aspects of digital transformation. And so, this is important because these programs, these initiatives alter all aspects of people, process, and tools. And so without sort of addressing these other areas of these initiatives, we may risk a company not being ready to adopt or scale or wasting lots of time and money. And as this event sort of articulates, we may end up in the dreaded pilot purgatory. So let's get into it with our panelists. My first question goes to you, Matt. No initiative goes as planned. Issues are discovered as we go along. We always have opportunities to pivot or in some cases even have complete failures. And so hopefully we gain some lessons learned from this process. What are some of the common pitfalls manufacturers or perhaps in your own experience that you've faced in getting an entire organization on board with a digital strategy?
Yeah, thanks for the question. As the only vendor on the panel here, I get to see all these projects across all these different companies, and so I kind of have a unique perspective on this. And one thing that we see quite a bit, lack of organizational buy-in at all the right silos, and oftentimes, someone's just trying to start small, which they should, in one of these silos, but it really, to do true digital transformation has to be across some of these silos. So I think just making sure that you're getting the right buy-in all the way across the board. Ryan, I think you're muted.
Mike, let's bring you into the conversation. Same question to you regarding the pitfalls, but feel free to share any of your own experience as well.
Yeah, so I agree with what Matt mentioned. I would also say that I think sometimes some of the pitfalls that I've experienced have been around people's understanding of the technology and what they think that it can provide. So having a poor understanding of the technology and not understanding how you're going to apply it in a way that will bring business value, I think is important. I think people believing that Industry 4.0 is a revolution and it should feel revolutionary. And, I always remind people that the American Revolution was 20 years. So it's going to feel far more evolutionary than revolutionary. And overly ambitious expectations on some of those first projects where there's invention that's required and there's experimentation that's required. And so those costs aren't factored in, and then they feel underwhelmed with the results. especially if they haven't thought about how they would leverage these technologies at scale.
Sama, let's ask you. I mean, you've been doing this for some time at Daimler. How do you want to weigh in on this topic?
Yeah, let me say that one of the key, or let's say one of the most conflict situation is the fact that sometimes, yeah, there is a problem taking time that is needed to implement. There is needed to implement digitalization technologies while delivering business efficiency. And this is a common conflict situation a lot of organizations have. And now how to bring the people to understand that, okay, the transformation is a journey. And at the same time, of course, they have to deliver. And you need a very good background or platform where you can bring these two aspects on the same track.
So I think you guys started to talk about the enduring aspects of running a digitalization strategy or initiative, right? And I think as you all sort of illuminated, there's some sense of this isn't going to happen overnight. There's the likelihood that we're going to have failures, right? And so, as we, failure is going to occur. We have to identify that this has to be in some ways acceptable part of our journey, as long as we learn and progress past it. How have, Sama, starting with you, how have you overcome some of those early missteps or failures in your programs?
Yeah, I will say that, when it's come to implement this kind of digitalization strategies, there are many ways. You can do it in a centralized way. So there is a top-down approach, a specific teams defining the strategies, defining the implementation plans, or you can do it in a decentralized way. And I think this is one of the key points how to do it. So because especially in large organizations, you have different business units with different aspects of how to do the job and to deliver the product. Sometimes you have software aspects, you have hardware, you have a lot of topics, you have manufacturing with different aspects of how the business is working. So one of the key points for me is to have this decentralized way of implementing. And also doing it by defining use case and build roadmaps based on this use case, because this use case should be what you want to deliver to the end customer. And this is the driving force of your implementation plan.
Thanks, Sama. Mike, do you want to share anything in terms of missteps that you've observed in your experience or professional activities?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest missteps that we've seen is having a poor understanding of where you are in terms of data maturity. So just acknowledge where you're at with your data maturity. Don't expect to be able to do, advanced analytics and prediction if you don't have the ability to already discover and diagnose problems with the data that you already have. I like to think about what we try to do is, we're always trying to be able to tame the complexity in manufacturing through advanced algorithms and advanced control schemes that allow us to better control our processes and have more precise, more predictable processes. And that may mean that you have to start over with what type of data you're even collecting. You may not be collecting the right types of data that you need for the process and the challenges that you're trying to address. And just understanding that that's going to take time. And so think of it more as that evolution, and it's not this big flash and you have success in a couple months.
Matt, you come from a different point of view, right? Having, supporting a variety of different customers and manufacturers. What are some of the common missteps you're seeing? And, can you build on any of the things that Sama and Mike have articulated?
Yeah, definitely agree with the data. Don't expect software to be some magical solution because your data strategy is a mess. Data can only help you once there's some clean data in place. And so I think going through those first initial steps, the other thing with that I see trying to help companies by introducing software, we often have to have what we would call a decision maker. Oftentimes the decision makers think that they're the decision maker and they're not, and really trying to understand who's going to have the authority here. Do they have all their budget? Do they know if this is going to be a cross-functional thing? Is all of that straightened out? And from the outside in, if you don't have those things, or we don't know, like, this person's responsible for the digital transformation project. If there isn't that one person that we can go to, chances are internally it's even messier, right? And we just, I often see our engagements on these projects. It's almost like helping them navigate the people and culture side of things just as much as trying to sell them what we offer. So.
Mike, maybe I can come back to you. One of the things that really stuck out from your statement was around bounding use cases, right, and setting realistic expectations. I know in my conversations with peers and other organizations, we oftentimes have this tendency to go towards the most exciting and attractive or complex use case, right? I mean, it's almost like as we're talking here about, where do you start if you're at the beginning of your journey or in the middle of your journey? Do you have any thoughts or recommendations to help folks avoid, say, going to the most complex solution, but maybe going to something that's more realistic, that A, is bounded, B, they already have the data, and C, maybe actually gives them a win in terms of real business outcome?
Yeah, so I think the key thing there is the business outcome piece, right? I think a lot of times we get enamored by the technology for the sake of the new technologies, and sometimes we get wrapped up in the shiny new object. And so one of the things that we've been thinking about is our connected manufacturing strategy really shouldn't be a separate strategy. It should be absolutely aligned with what we say is business critical. And so we're leveraging the technologies not to demonstrate the value of the technology, but to demonstrate that the technology can bring business value. So instead of trying to look at a bunch of different technologies, and instead of trying to go across our entire manufacturing network of 220 plants, maybe it's time to start with a couple of those key imperatives and just focus on a couple of core plants, go deep, drive the understanding of how you connect the technology to value, such that you can create those wins, and you can give people something to actually go look at and understand and make this tangible, so that they can feel it and understand it better.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Let's transition to the elephant in the room, which is COVID. It's affecting all our organizations, and I wouldn't say it's affecting all organizations equally. It seems to be asymmetrical across geographies and industries, and how we have to deal with this. But certainly, it's made all of us sort of reassess things like workplace safety, people continuity, just in general, the use of technology in times of pandemics. I'd be interesting, maybe starting with you, Sama, from your perspective, has the pandemic sort of hindered, or is it accelerated or changed our view of digitalization plans in any way?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So what I'm observing is that, in fact, the pandemic is accelerating the digitalization plans of many companies or organizations. For example, from the pure ICT, information, communication, and technologies point of view, it's really speeding up the communication virtual communication, virtual collaboration. So people are collaborating more and more using digital platforms. And this is also, let's say, a good opportunities for many organizations to optimize their digital or network infrastructure. So I remember at the beginning when we start doing virtual calls, and so the networks broke down all the time. So, yeah. But now 1-2 weeks later, very stable. So it was really a speed up. And now also this is a good situation because now we can do more and more what we call, for example, remote manufacturing, remote maintenance, remote control of the production line, and so on. So now we have another situation, very good for digitalization technologies or strategies.
Yeah. Mike, what's been your experience as we go through this pandemic? And do you have any thoughts? Because I know we get kind of hung up on COVID because it's on the news. It's something we experience every day. But maybe you could share your thoughts not only with what it means for you, over the past couple months and now, but what's your view or thought in like how we come out of this, and if it also plays into your digital plans?
So. Certainly, I think that we've been set up for success because of the fact that we focused on some of these foundational digital efforts, and we've been able to leverage them during this time to create a level of transparency, which I think is absolutely critical when you have people working remotely. So having that level of transparency through data that is sources of truth, I think has been really important. But I think that what we've been able to do is there are technologies that historically would have been extremely challenging for us to get over that, I'll call it the activation energy, for lack of a better term, right? Augmented reality is an example. So, that was a technology where, we struggled to demonstrate the value of it within our factories because of the types of processes that we run on our shop floor. But when you have to do a safety review and you have to maintain 6 feet of social distancing and you have some people who aren't allowed to travel, all of a sudden, you're forced to leverage some of these technologies so that you can accomplish the work that you need to do. And so I think in the future, it's really changing our viewpoint on, what can be centrally managed, what needs to be managed locally. How do we leverage these technologies at scale? In ways in which we didn't think our plants historically have been connected. So I think that it's bringing us together a little bit, actually, as we look at how these technologies can be used as we come out of COVID and change the way we work for the better.
Yeah, great insight. It's so interesting to listen to how the pandemic has actually brought more value, if you will, to some of our digital journey activities and the initiatives. And it's fascinating. It'll be fascinating to see how it allows us to sort of move through this and even be more effective as we come out of it. Let's move on to the topic of stakeholders. The concept, the leadership aspects of these initiatives, right? We started to touch on this. Manufacturing organizations are complex, and certainly the larger the organization, the more complex it is. And let's be realistic here. Some organizations are born out of mergers and acquisitions. And even if they're not, right, we see we have really complex cultural process, skill set differences across entities, across sites and departments, right? Starting with Matt, in your experience, I don't know if there's a best strategy per se, but what are some of the better or best strategies and tactics you're seeing to get stakeholders, all the way from, say, the factory floor to the C-suite to really buy into a vision and a plan?
Yeah. Early on in my career, on some of my own large-scale projects that I was trying to move forward across a large organization, I had a mentor talk to me about a Japanese term called mimawashi. And it literally means like preparing the tree roots to be moved. And so, individually, like taking care of each root. And so if you can think about, people and institutions as trees, and how you have to be very careful about, making sure that you're doing all of your groundwork to make sure that everyone is actually ready to shift a whole system or introduce a new technology or tool. Just making sure that you really sit down and, from an engineering standpoint, I like to think of organizations as like system diagrams. And so really, map out all the major pieces to that, and all the communication channels and all the existing systems that they're tied to, and really make a concerted effort to go and around on that diagram and really get the buy-in for each group. Because if you just have a big meeting, just say, hey, we've selected a new tool and we're moving forward with this, that's probably not going to go well.
Sama, this has been part of something core to your job responsibilities. But what's your take on this? And what have you seen work and not work?
Yeah, let's say for me, one of the key points to do that is what I call let's say modern leadership. Modern leadership in a way that is describing how we communicate together and how we work together, how we interact together. Rules are very important, of course, but in a modern leadership, principles are more valuable. So we have to act using principles instead of only using rules. I don't say that rules are not important. Again, rules are important, but principle, I will evaluate more principles. Regarding the implementation of this kind of digitalization technologies, for example, I will suggest, let's say, a two-way approach. That means, for example, in this kind of leadership culture, the top is defining the purpose, the why we want to do things. The bottom line is defining the use cases because they know how the job is done. And both together agree about the what has to be done to get there. And this is one of the key principles also. That means co-creation. So in that way, we have, let's say, all the stakeholders on board, people who are playing their role in defining the big vision, the purpose, and people who know how the business is working. And this is how we have proceeded along our transformation journey. And we can see that, of course, we have a lot of new, let's say, new business models, yeah, because of this innovation culture, because of this new leadership culture.
Hey, Matt, just a follow-up question. I mean, since you do deal with so many organizations, is there what are some of the typical hurdles you see from a leadership perspective in terms of how especially corporate or C-suite stakeholders are supporting what Sama was talking about, right? It doesn't always have to be top down. We can lead by this concept of principles, right? Where it guides us to do the right thing and support the larger goals of the organization. Are there any things that we really need to address early on with senior stakeholders to ensure that the rest of the organization can sort of do what Sama's talking about?
Yeah, like, thinking about those principles, or, sometimes digital transformation is a culture shift, right? And I think, I think culture shifts have to happen both bottom up and top down. And if your top level leadership is not bought into that cultural change, you're going to fail. If the grassroots, if the people on the shop floor are not bought into that, it's going to fail. And I think it's really encouraging. I think if you can see your executive leadership that on an earnings call or in an investor meeting, talk about these principles and driving changes and why it's important to the organization. Otherwise, if it's just a bullet list that someone sees in a memo and no one really talks about it, like I just think it's going to be a much longer road ahead. So, you're muted again, Ryan.
Senior leadership and communication is really critical, right? I mean, they're going to set the the framework, as Sama was talking about, they're going to allow the organization, if you will, to proceed down this journey. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the three sort of critical components we discussed before this, right? Organizational structure, culture, and I don't know, we'll call it the right talent. In terms of how important these softer elements are in these initiatives. So, Sama, we started talking about how do we, what are the best strategies, the tactics for stakeholders, but in your experience, what are some of the right organizational structures, or maybe you can explore this a little bit. We talked about top down, bottom up, maybe a disorganized, if you will, a structurally disorganized approach. But what do you see work in terms of how you actually structure this team for success?
Again, there is no concrete, let's say, there is a mix of organization types. So we need a mixed organization built on top-down approach and network approach. So we cannot only work with a hierarchical approach today. This is my point of view, because of all the challenge and the speed and so on. And only also a network organization is sometimes critical depending on the business. So we need a mixed one. So a mixed one that is highly adaptable. We know some of the topics, let's say agile organization, digital organization, swarm organization, all these types, based on this mixed form. And three key elements are important. So for this type of organization is, of course, how we do business. So methods and tools, what we use. It's also the organization structure itself, adaptable network, and also the mindset as key, as we talked before, that defining how we work together, how we collaborate together based on principles, and so on. And now in the deployment, of course, there are specific, let's say, steps to be done in order to get all people on board. You need completely to change your, let's say, your HR processes, your the way you do people development, all this kind of stuff. In terms of the work, you need to organize your work that it's a kind of package, end-to-end package along the value stream. So where you can define input, output very clearly, and business units are working together as partners to deliver the end customer experience. So all people are focusing, working together, not between, I have to give my work to the other organization. No, we are partners because we are focusing on the end customer experience. And this is also the bottom line of the why, because we are focusing on the same why. Yeah, thanks.
Mike, what's your perspective? I mean, I know you sounds like you've been doing this for some time, and like all of us, right? You're in the mix of continuing the journey. Right. Have you seen any? What are some of the structures or ways that we really support the organization and the agility that's necessary for Industry 4.0?
Yeah. So actually, something pretty exciting happened at 3M this year. This is the first time in 3M's recent history, since we've grown to the size that we are, that we've actually centralized manufacturing again. And a lot of that is around the need to have speed in this space. By centralizing it, our hope is that we can create a clarity of purpose and create alignment faster, so that we minimize the amount of competing priorities that we have. And we're able to speed the adoption. We're able to scale this better. And we can also get to the point of interoperability. Within 3M, we can go around and we can point out a lot of pockets of excellence, right? Have we done this before? Absolutely. But we've done it in one factory, or for one product line, or in one division. But have we done it globally across the organization? Absolutely not. Can we replicate what we've done in the past? No, because we didn't build it to scale. And so I think for us, we're hoping that having the centralization will actually enable us to be able to scale these types of technologies. in a way that historically we haven't been able to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a great example of what Sama was talking about. Go ahead, Sama.
Yeah, maybe I can add something. So one of the other aspects that are also very important is decision making in this kind of organization. We know in typical organization how long is it to take let's say a big decision. So you need to go one, two step, and then in a certain meeting you say no, it's not right. Then you come down again, and then okay, 2 weeks later, ta 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 ta. So we know that okay, we have to take faster decision. And of course, one of the key points using data is data-based decision making. On the other hand, is to have a structure where the decision is made where the knowledge is created. So, and this is very important because you need these insights together with data to take the right decision and a fast decision. And that's why you need this kind of, let's say, structure that are really focused on end-to-end package along the value stream.
So if I understand you guys correctly, I mean, what we're talking about is whatever structure your organization decides to utilize, it really has to be focused on common goals, right? What it is that we're all here to exist for, what is to make our business better, grow top line, bottom line. We have to have the speed and decision making to ensure that we don't take 52 weeks to do what should be done in 4, and that we have to really ensure that we have all the right domain experts across the system, right? Or a system of processes to really get the value and scale that I think our organizations are looking for, and maybe that's what's missing up till now. Great, thanks. Mike, let's turn to you and talk a little bit of from a culture and talent piece. Change management, business change management, whatever we want to call it, is part of really any major transformational initiative, and probably even more, just for the same reasons we were just talking about, even more important in how we tackle Industry 4.0. Both to get and to keep stakeholders on board and aligned throughout this journey. Tell us how you're managing or approaching this at 3M.
Yes. So, at the end of the day, the success in this space is going to be made or broken by your ability to have the buy-in on the shop floor, right? Mm-hmm. So, being open and transparent about the objectives with the team members on the shop floor, being able to focus on their needs, and understanding that the way in which we used to do things in the past didn't necessarily set them up for success. And what I mean by that is that our processes in manufacturing have grown increasingly more complex over time. And we still demand and expect perfection from our employees on the floor. But there's only so much that a human brain can actually do. And so when those complex processes no longer run in a way that, that a human brain can comprehend, we have to bring other technologies to help them out. And so, I think that for us to be successful, we need to make sure that we're able to demonstrate the value of these technologies in a way that enables our shop floor expertise to be able to do their job better and easier.
Sama, I don't know if you wanted to share anything in terms of that. I know that this is part of what you live and experience every day. Do you want to embellish on your experiences here?
Regarding let's say the change management.
Yeah, sure. Or just how, building on what Mike was talking about. Maybe you have some examples of how you get buy-in from folks on the shop floor, because this is a challenge, right? I mean, you can do everything right technically. You can have the perfect objectives and strategic alignment, everything we've talked about so far. And if it's at odds with what the people on the factory floor do every day or expect, it's going to fail.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the questions people have is always, what is it in for me in that big stuff? So if you can't give concrete answers to that, then you will lose the people, and you will lose a lot of, let's say, you will do a lot of efforts doing stuff, and people will have different, let's say, topics they are thinking about, they are aware of. So you need really to focus, of course, on the business, but yeah, talking with people.
Yeah.
So talking with them, what are their concrete challenge, not only regarding the task, but yeah, all around. So sometimes we engineers, we focus only on the, let's say, on the technologies, and forgot that it's about people.
Yep.
With different challenge, private, professional, everything. So, and this is the key. First, of course, they have the buy-in is made by explaining the people the why. Again, it's very important, the purpose. Why are we doing this thing now? And why not tomorrow or yesterday? And then, yeah, let the people explain their needs in order to do this job, in order to get in. They have the knowledge again. They have to be sure that, okay, they are key in order to make this vision real. And if they are, if they know that, I'm pretty sure you will get a much better environment to win.
Yeah, I think that the idea, not only do you get their buy-in, but you bring that diversity of thought from the people who actually have to support and execute this. It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Matt, one of the things we talked a little bit about was the workforce, right? And it's an interesting time where even pre-COVID, a lot of organizations struggle to even get the right talent or top talent. And then there's also this looming idea that we all see, which is the large retiring workforce around the corner. You work with so many different manufacturers. How do you see manufacturers handling this aging out challenge? I mean, and the idea that these folks have been around for so long and have so much domain expertise and knowledge, right, that they're going to take with them. How do you deal with the skill sets and sort of this loss of knowledge as you try to unfold and implement a digital transformation initiative?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to an aerospace company earlier this year, and he told me that 50% of their workforce is over the age of 55, and that over the next 10 years, just due to forced retirement, they'll half of them will be gone, right? And it's interesting. When we're talking about shop floor and things like that, one thing that Vertex does is help communicate 3D information wherever you need it to be. So shop floor is one of these things where this retiring workforce has always had 2D. They work off of 2D drawings. They work off of static sets of work instructions. And at a certain point, they say, oh, I've done this before. I know how to do this. But maybe something was unique on that line, or something, there's a lot of customization now in manufacturing. And so every single order can be slightly different. And so, going to this, generational divide here, we've got, I'm on the top end of the millennial scale. I grew up with a Nintendo. We now have people that grew up most of their lives with an iPhone, and they expect a very different technology set. They're like, well, how come I can communicate like this with my friends outside of work, but I'm still looking at a PDF of a 2D static image. And this thing hasn't changed since I started here. And so we see that on the shop floor with manufacturing. We see that in the with aftermarket with service and sales and things like that. And even customers expect, if I'm gonna, if I'm let's say I'm in heavy construction, if I'm gonna buy a multi-million-dollar customized thing, I want to see what it looks like before I buy this thing. Just don't give me a 50-page PDF of options on this.
Yeah.
And so, it really is this interesting thing where, this generation that's about to age out, they're also some of these, key decision makers that we were talking about early on. And so, some of this is just like, you either see, oh, we've always done it this way, or, we need to really think about this younger generation that's coming up, and, talking about the legacy and the knowledge, is this just tacit knowledge baked into these individuals, or, is this knowledge communicated somewhere where we can get the younger generation to understand and think about it in their way? And, I keep going back to this aerospace company about trying to get, with Aero, you always hear about the model-based definition is really probably more further ahead in aerospace, just because of some of the government requirements around that. And they're the first ones to try to get this model-based definition. And again, like we're coming across some manufacturers that will tell us, yeah, like this younger generation, they don't even know how to read a 2D blueprint. Like, I don't know what to do. Or, we offer them training, and, this is important with COVID too. Like, it's not going to be this thing where you get trained by, flying them to Detroit to sit through a 5-day seminar in person now. Like, how are you going to train these service techs remotely? So it's going to be an interesting next couple years. And, I think the COVID pandemic is going to accelerate all of that.
Yeah. Let's, maybe quickly, Sama, you can talk a little bit about recruitment and, deployment of talent. I think, we talked earlier about, sort of these initiatives span outside of IT and sort of the traditional domains, right? And so we expect an entirely different, as Matt's indicating, right? Whether it's generational, or it's your expertise and level of experience, or it's simply you're working across the entirety of your business value stream. I mean, how do you have to bring in people who have, maybe new skill sets or new cultures or new expectations? How do you approach the talent acquisition to accomplish this and support this?
Yeah. In fact, there are many studies about this topic now. But to summarize, as you said very quickly, for me, talents want to know how they can contribute to that big thing, and how they can be part of that movement. This is very, very important for them. And as a resume, you need, again, to communicate what is your purpose, what is your vision, so that they can buy in. This is much more important for them. And to provide them a modern or a digital work environment. This is the way they are working now, as Matt explained. And of course, along with this innovative and digital culture. Additionally, of course, you need to provide them multiple career paths, not only the typical we know, to be a manager and senior manager and so on, but so that they have multiple choice. This is the way today. They need this kind of alternatives, and also a transparent reward system. Everybody wants to be rewarded when there is a good job. And if you do that, I think you will have innovative people working for the success.
Yeah, you got to celebrate those small wins and the big wins, right, as an organization.
Absolutely.
Hey, Matt, last question before we close out. How do you know when a company's ready to sort of scale or layer on these next generation technologies, right? I mean, we've talked so much around the organization, the culture, and and even just sort of like, do you have some of the basic technologies or things in place? What's your view? Like, when are we really ready to unleash and really blast past, pilot purgatory?
Yeah. I think we've touched on a lot of this so far. And, I think early on, we're talking about, don't expect technology to be this magical cure. It's going to be an enabler, and unless you have the right basic building blocks in place for your digitization strategy, that starts with, one thing that I heard loud and clear during this panel is culture and people. And so making sure that those things are properly addressed early on. Mike talked about, making sure your data strategy is in place. And once you kind of get those alignments, I think technology can be like a very good enabler to help with these efforts. But just don't expect your CIO to come in and say, "Hey, we need a AI digital twin, and that's gonna solve everything." Like it's again, it starts with like, what exact problem am I trying to solve? Let's start small and then gradually roll that out. I've seen, and I'm sure Mike and some have seen, factory by factory or group by group, and you start to see that. But when is someone ready? Like, I think, again, making sure that the organizational is ready to have their roots uprooted and placed somewhere else. I think, and don't expect a vendor to come in and tell you that you're ready. Like, that's got to be an internal thing.
Yeah, thank you. So in closing, thank you. In closing, I think, I heard each of you kind of highlight maybe three sort of themes, right? First, I heard us talk about the modern leadership is critical to really gain that alignment, the commitment to endure through the journey, the multi-year journey that will go on. And so this concept of clarity of purpose and alignment to real tangible business goals. Second, I heard we spent a lot of time talking about creating this culture of change, the acceptance of new technologies, maybe guiding principles in terms of what motivates and drives our organizational activities to make the business better. And then also sort of ensuring that both existing and new employees understand their role. I mean, it's so critical to how they adopt. And then lastly, this idea of scale, right? I mean, we have to sort of move past these siloed approaches and away from pilots and into, how do we as a company deploy large scale into production? So that does it for this session. Much appreciation to our panelists for sharing their experiences, insight. To our attendees, enjoy the balance of the event, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for your leadership on this panel, and what an outstanding conversation and so many learnings. It was awesome. Next up is Candace Collins. She's Marketing America's lead for Signavio. She's going to be presenting a case study with her client Jabil, and it's titled How to Prioritize Customer Needs and Expectations. So enjoy.